It began with noise. The hum of machines, the buzz of radios, the laughter of people who believed the future had finally arrived. The 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, an age of jazz, speed, and shimmering optimism. Cities glowed with electric light. Automobiles roared through streets once ruled by horses. Airplanes danced in the sky. In America, wealth seemed to fall from the heavens. Stocks soared. Wages rose. Factories churned. Men in suits spoke of permanent prosperity, as if humanity had finally conquered the cycle of boom and bust. Money was no longer paper. It was faith. Faith that the line would keep rising, that tomorrow would always be richer than today. But beneath the glitter, cracks began to form. Hairline fractures running through the golden illusion. Factories produced faster than people could buy. Farmers grew more grain than the world could eat. Debt crept into homes like a shadow. And speculation, the fever of easy fortune, became a national religion. On Wall Street, brokers shouted like preachers, "Buy now, sell later." Ordinary people, shopkeepers, teachers, factory workers, they all joined the crusade. Stocks weren't just investments anymore. They were dreams, bottled and sold. And then one morning in October 1929, the dream began to die. It started with a whisper, a few nervous trades, a flicker on the ticker tape. But whispers turned to panic, panic to chaos, and chaos to silence. October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday, the day the music stopped. In the span of hours, fortunes evaporated. Men who had built empires on borrowed money found themselves standing on sidewalks, holding worthless paper. Banks failed. Companies folded. The ticker that once sang of profit now printed despair. Newspapers spoke of suicides on Wall Street, of men stepping from windows, unable to face the ruin. But the real fall didn't happen in Manhattan. It happened everywhere. In small towns, in farms, in factories, where the invisible strings of the market reached like a spider's web. When Wall Street broke, the world broke with it. Factories shut their gates. Men lined up by the thousands for a single bowl of soup. Farmers burned their crops because they were worth less than the bags they were stored in. Families packed their lives into wagons and drifted down empty highways in search of work that didn't exist. It wasn't just an economic collapse. It was a collapse of belief. The belief that progress was unstoppable, that modernity meant safety. In America, unemployment soared past 25%. Children went hungry. Banks vanished overnight, taking with them the savings of lifetimes. In cities like Chicago and Detroit, men stood on street corners selling apples, not because apples were rare, but because hope was. The Depression didn't just strike the United States. It rippled outward, across oceans, through every nation tied to the fragile web of trade and debt. Factories in Germany closed. British ships sat idle. France trembled. From Argentina to Australia, nations watched their economies collapse like dominoes. It was as if the world had been living in a dream, and now abruptly had awakened to find the lights gone out. For farmers, the nightmare deepened. The earth itself turned against them. In the Great Plains, years of over-farming stripped the soil bare. Then came drought. Winds rose from the west, carrying the land itself into the sky. The Dust Bowl, clouds of black dirt that swallowed entire towns. Cows suffocated where they stood. Children coughed up mud. Families fled west to California, chasing rumors of work and mercy. They were called Okies, refugees in their own land. They left behind their homes, their fields, their graves, everything but their hunger. America had once been a land of abundance. Now it was a land of dust and despair. Yet even in the darkness there was resilience. Communities formed soup kitchens. Strangers shared what little they had. Songs like "Brother, Can You Spare a Dime?" echoed through the radio, a melody of both pain and pride. President Herbert Hoover insisted recovery was near. But to the millions sleeping under newspapers, recovery felt like a cruel joke. Then, in 1932, a new voice rose from the static, calm, confident, and filled with warmth. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. When Roosevelt spoke, he didn't promise miracles. He promised courage. He promised that the only thing Americans had to fear was fear itself, and that mattered. Because in those years, fear had become its own kind of currency. FDR's New Deal became a lifeline, a pact between government and the people. Men built roads, dams, and bridges, not for profit but for purpose. Artists were hired to paint murals, writers to document the struggle, musicians to sing of hope. It was a revolution of spirit, work, dignity, and belief, reborn from the ashes of despair. But recovery was slow. Every gain felt fragile. Even as bread returned to tables and jobs to hands, the memory of loss lingered like a scar. For an entire generation, money was no longer something to trust. It was something to fear. People hid savings under mattresses, distrusted banks, and never forgot how quickly wealth could vanish. The Great Depression wasn't just an economic event. It was psychological, a deep wound in humanity's sense of control. Around the world, its echoes were even darker. In Germany, desperation fed rage. Factories closed, hunger grew, and a failed painter named Adolf Hitler promised revival through nationalism and hate. By 1933, democracy itself was collapsing, and from the ruins of economic despair, war began to take shape. The Great Depression had not only broken banks, it had broken nations. It showed how easily hunger could turn into anger, and anger into war. But within the suffering, something else grew: understanding. Economists began to study the crash, searching for patterns, for reasons, for meaning. A British economist named John Maynard Keynes proposed something radical: that governments should not wait for markets to fix themselves, but should spend in hard times to build, to employ, to restore confidence. His ideas would shape the modern world, from the highways of America to the welfare systems of Europe. By the late 1930s, factories stirred again. War loomed on the horizon, and with it came demand for steel, for ships, for weapons. Tragically, it was global conflict, not peace, that finally ended the Great Depression. The same factories that had once fallen silent now thundered with production. The unemployed became soldiers, the idle became workers. The gears of industry turned once more, powered by fear, necessity, and blood. And when the war ended, the world was different. Nations built safeguards, central banks, social safety nets, trade agreements, all born from the memory of collapse. They swore never to let the world go broke again, but history has a way of forgetting its own lessons. The booms returned, in the 1950s, the 1980s, the 2000s. Each time, people said, "This time is different." Each time, greed whispered louder than memory. The Great Depression remains a ghost, haunting boardrooms, stock exchanges, and the quiet fears of ordinary people. It reminds us that prosperity without balance is illusion, and that wealth built on speculation is a house built on sand. Behind every chart, every market, every glittering skyline, lies the same fragile truth, that faith, not gold, is what keeps the world turning. And when that faith breaks, everything falls with it. The story of the Great Depression is not just about banks or business. It's about people, their suffering, their endurance, and their rediscovery of hope. It's about mothers who sewed patches on old coats, fathers who walked miles for a loaf of bread, children who learned to dream again under dim lamplight. It's about a world that lost everything and learned what truly mattered, because sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what wealth really is. The Great Depression was not the end of prosperity. It was the rebirth of perspective. It taught humanity that progress without compassion is hollow, that money without meaning is dust, and that hope, fragile, stubborn, beautiful hope, is the one currency that never collapses. Even today, when markets tremble and screens flash red, echoes of 1929 can still be heard, faint but clear, a reminder carved into history that the world once went broke, and from its ruins, rebuilt itself stronger, wiser, and more human. Because true wealth isn't found in numbers, but in resilience. It's not what we earn, but what we endure. Not what we take, but what we build together. You've been watching Wealth Untold, where stories of power, fortune, and fate reveal the truth behind human progress. Join us next time as we journey again into history's forgotten fortunes and uncover the light that shines even in our darkest times. Because true wealth is never lost, it's just waiting to be rediscovered.